Good morning, colleagues. I come from government, and you know, when you come from government, people feel that probably you don't have any input. But I think it's quite critical. I've heard your presentation. It's very interesting, and especially the surveys that you talked to. And I think we can have an engagement on those. And I think it's quite critical that we tap into your survey results and then be able to see how we influence policy. Colleagues, this kind of stage is known to us. And I think it's quite critical that we get to understand government business. There's a number of issues that I'm going to talk to, particularly trying to go back into times when particularly, let me just say, the Department of Home Affairs where we come from, and then where we are today as the Department of Home Affairs. And I'm glad to say that the Department of Home Affairs, we are continuously looking for improvement, because we believe that this is the way that we can achieve the objective of government. Let me start by saying, I think most of the people around here, I've seen Connie, she's around. I've seen quite several colleagues that I worked with them through the years when we were really championing the changes in the Department of Home Affairs to better the situation, particularly into servicing business. Because the mandate of the Immigration Act is very clear, as Suboko indicated. But with that mandate, it comes a responsibility. And it's always quite critical that we understand, before I talk to the issues in this menu, to say that immigration business as such, it's not a home affairs matter. And it can't be a home affairs issue. Immigration is the responsibility of all of us: business, labor, government, civil society. We all have a responsibility when it comes to immigration. Home Affairs is mandated by the Act of Parliament to be the lead department. So we are the lead department in ensuring that we enable activities to happen. We enable business to run. We enable people who wishes to invest in South Africa, we issue them with enabling documents in the form of a visa. But however, we need to ensure that in as much as we are driving the development part of our government, we look at the risk. So in other words, when we adjudicate your application for a work visa, you said in your presentations that some missions are taking 2 months, some missions are taking 2 days, some missions are taking forever. It is quite critical for us. Because when we receive an application for UCONI, we look deeper. We look at the risk that might be embedded in that type of application. So in the South African embassy or embassies abroad, Home Affairs is represented. We have members of South African intelligence. We have members of South African police. We have actually government departments sitting out there in the mission to be able to advise Home Affairs when issues are flagged to them, to say, this is an application that we receive, let's say, argument's sake, in Islamabad for a general work visa, and we have doubt. We pass it on to the colleagues at the State Intelligence Agency who will do the background checks. So those are the processes that are involved in the issuing of either any type of a visa. So that's why you'll find discrepancies. Why here is taking 10 days, why there is taking forever, because of the risk analysis that we need to build into that case. And I think we have cases that we have seen in South Africa. For argument's sake, we all know it is in public domain that the white widow obtained citizenship of South Africa. Because we did not do a thorough analysis in terms of the risks, we ended up granting that person a status in South Africa. And what happened? He came in, he resided in South Africa, he got involved in those activities, and then there you are. He's a South African. So those are the issues. So immigration is quite key that we understand that it is not a home affairs, it is the responsibility of everyone. Now, let me come to the theme. Let me just give a background in terms of permitting environment where we come from. You'll recall, for those that have been in the industry for quite a long, we had regional offices in the rest of the country. In Cape Town, we have a number of offices. In Durban, in KZN, and in Polokwane, we have regional offices. And these people, or these regions, were mandated to process applications for temporary and permanent residences. That was in the olden era. Then we needed to move forward in terms of how we bring efficiency in this area. Then the decision was taken by the executive in probably 2008, 2007, to look at how better we can deal with the adjudication of visas. Then it resulted into centralization of visas to headquarters, meaning Pretoria, the national office. Then within the stream of that, we needed therefore to look into who is our client. We need to identify who is our client. Everybody is a client to Home Affairs. You apply for an ID, you are a client. So in other words, we are having monopoly. So we needed to identify who is our clients. What do we need to do to better work with? Then the Directorate Corporate Account was formed in the Department of Home Affairs under the Chief Directorate Permitting. You'll understand that Chief Directorate Permitting has a number of activities. It involves permanent residence, it involves temporary residences, it involves your functional support, that is your waivers and all other activities, proof of residences. Then corporate account then emerged to be a dedicated unit to work with business. Then we then collaborated lengthy with stakeholders, and then came up with the criteria on how we're going to do. We worked very closely by that time with SARS, and I think if you go to SARS, they've got a much bigger, large unit called the Large Account Unit at SARS. So we worked very closely with them when our corporate account was still in an infant stage, and then and currently we have a number of corporate that are registered with corporate accounts. But however, I must say that in around 2015, after the new immigration regulations, we did a round of call for corporates to even register, because we anticipated, in other ways, we were driving that we need to intensify the engagement and the working together with business. That we wanted to have more companies, but it came with very low applications that we received for companies. But then the decision again was taken to say that each and every business that is a corporate business, we need to enlist it and then register it at the Department of Home Affairs. So hence you will see that some of the companies that did not apply, but if they came later to show interest, we will receive those applications Of course, they were required to meet the same criteria that we had for registration of corporate accounts, so that we are able to enlist and understand really the nature of business, because we need to work with those clients in their number of projects so that we understand their immigration needs. Then the journey continued to then collaborate with provincial governments in terms of the one-stop shop initiative. We began in 2014 when the new regulations, I think it was around 2014 years, when we launched the Gauteng, by that time we were just calling it Gauteng Investment Center, GIC. But then the recommendations on the IMC, that is interministerial recommendations, after the implementation of the regulation, gave directions to say that the lead department in terms of the one-stop shop services need to be led by the Department of Trade and Industry. Then that mandate was given to the Department of Trade and Industry. Already Gauteng had a center which is based here in Sandton Drive, and then we proceeded to launch the one in Western Cape for businesses. We also launched of late, I think around December, the one-stop shop for businesses in KZN. We are at the engagement with the Limpopo government to roll it to the Limpopo province. This is in addition to the existing service centers of our visa facilitation. As you all know and understand, that our visa applications are initiated through VFS, which is a visa facility center. So there's a number of activities that are happening in those centers. I think if one of you or one of us have visited those centers, we'll really give a testimony to it. I think we're all familiar with these criteria as I touched on it, on how a corporate can be enlisted even though they did not register in 2014. They must still fulfill this criteria, then we enlist them. The purpose that we enlist colleagues is basically because, in government we get audited. We don't want, when an auditor general asks for who are the members of the corporate accounts, we cannot account. We need to account to say, AG, this is what happened in 2014. The company were registered, and these ones were registered during the Gazette that was made, and these ones were made outside the Gazette. But the same criteria are fulfilled. Then Auditor General will understand. We're talking the number of visas, magnitude of capital expenditures. If it is in the national priority, we look at those. If it's contributing to the critical skills mix, we also look at the skills transfer initiatives. And what is key again is at least 60% of the total staff complement is South Africans. These are all in terms of our immigration legislation. The criteria for selection, it is basically run through the interdepartmental engagements. The committee sits by that time, then they will arrive at a decision and then appoint corporate. So for now, I would say this has become a little bit, we don't implement because we've decided to say we will bring companies even if they are not there, but they must fulfill the criteria. Let's talk to the theme, and I think the main call for Home Affairs to come and do this presentation is to talk to the immigration compliance. And in terms of these colleagues, it is quite key that you read this in collaborations with the Department of Labor Employment Services Act, what it says and what Home Affairs Immigration Act says. These are the obligations the employer has. Suboko touched on it. It's quite critical that each and every, if it's an HR or personal practitioner responsible in your company, is the person responsible to ensure that the expatriates' documents are well documented in terms of the activities and conditions of visas that we've granted. It's an obligation that the employer is given by the Immigration Act. This is the continuation of that activity. But what is key here is an employer needs to make sure that illegal foreigners is not employed in their premises. This is quite key. This is very significant, and I think you have seen it of late. And I must say that within the Home Affairs Department, our inspectorate unit, we are trying to capacitate that unit so that we are able to reach to all corners when information is given to us. So you will see a lot of movement, a lot of activities from our central law enforcement really moving forward. And I think you are clear what really has warranted this to happen because of number of investigations that are happening across in different sectors, particularly in the project of national interest. There's a significant move that you're going to see, very much unannounced visits from the department's inspectorate unit. So I'm glad that at least HR practitioners are the ones to be held accountable when we found some people not supposed to be in your employment. I think I will just try and skip because the presentation is quite long. But we all, and I believe your members, honorable member, have the Immigration Act and regulations in their spaces, because it is mandatory that as an HR person you have the Immigration Act and its regulation so that you familiarize yourself with the areas that you need to comply with. Let me just keep that. Aiding and abetting. What we say here is what we regard as aiding and abetting. If we find any person in your premises, whether providing instruction or is training at your premises, and he doesn't have the right documents, it's in violation of the law. It's in serious violation. So in other words, when we come, it happens particularly I will just single out the sector. If you look at universities in South Africa, it's very common that you find these things. That you find people at the university and they don't have the right papers and they are lecturing. Some of them attend classes, even if they are not in classes. But if we happen to be at that premises and we pick them, they don't have visas, the law says they are receiving instructions or they are training there. So they are in violation of the law. That is aiding and abetting, in as far as you as an employer is involved, you get charged as an employer. I don't know, probably maybe we can just ask how many of the companies have been visited by Immigration Central Law Enforcement and be fined. in contravention of the immigration law. Maybe in the House, if there's any, we can share that experience. And I think we have immigration practitioners who has been part of, experience this happenings by our central law enforcement. Hey, now this is the bad part of it. It's now saying really now we are really taking we are taking you to courts and all these kind of things because it needed to happen. So the courts of law make those provisions that we are able to do that. In any criminal proceedings arising out of the Immigration Act, it is no defense to avert that the status of foreigner concerned, or whether he or he was on illegal, was unknown to the accused, if it is proved that the accused ought reasonably to have known the status of this person. Anyone who knowingly employs an illegal foreigner or a foreigner in violation of this act shall be guilty of an offense and liable on conviction to a fine or an imprisonment not exceeding 1 year. This is what the Act says. Provided that such a person's conviction of such an offense shall be punishable by imprisonment not exceeding 2 years. So these are now when it gets to really becoming ugly, that we had to do that. But I believe if we all work together, this cannot happen. Because we've got very knowledgeable people of the industry that are able to guide clients out there. Obligations of a foreigner. A foreigner shall abide by the terms and conditions of his or her status, including any terms and conditions attached to the relevant visa or a permanent residence, as the case may be, by the Director General upon the issuance of the visa. Terms and conditions. We often find that people are employed. You get to a factory. I'm trying to think of some examples that we have of recent. You get to a manufacturing industry. You see a forklift being driven by a person. When you ask his documents, you find that the work visa says he's a financial manager, but he's driving a forklift. That is in violation of your terms and conditions. The employers get charged on those. The other issue are just the expiry dates and issues like that you need to ensure that you abide by that as employers, as foreigners. It's unfortunate because I wanted to have the colleagues from the Department of Labor to be in the House, because when this invitation was provided to us, we said the Department of Labor plays a significant role in the immigration. So in other words, Home Affairs is the lead department, supported by the Department of Labor, Department of Trade and Industry, and all other government departments where mandates are rested. Then there's this thing. Are workers without valid work visa protected by the law? This is a question. Section 213 of the Labor Relations Act makes that ruling to say that, yes, indeed, they are covered. It goes on to say that you need to also look at the definition in the basic conditions of employment, that is the legislation in the Department of Labor's mandate. And I said, the Department of Labor, we are an enabling department. But in terms of the Labor Relations Act, foreigners have every right like everyone else. Of course, when you read these pieces of legislation, what sits on top of it is the Constitution, as everything emanates from the Constitution. I think you are familiar with this case if you are an employer, particularly in the labor relations matter, and I urge that you go, if you haven't read it, just visit that case study and read through it. Discovery Health versus CCMA. Get the ruling there. What the commissioners ruled out. They have the right as foreigners. I'm not going to go through the case, but I will urge that if you can please look at that case and then internalize it, you will find the meaning. Okay. Yeah. Look at it this way. Sbuku, Connie, Jenny, and who else? Who are in the business? We do not have what we call extension of work visas. There's no such a thing in terms of the law. There's no such a thing as everything is an application for a work visa. So in other words, if a term of duty comes to an end for an expatriate, that person, remember how he was brought. He was brought here as a temporary measure to say that we don't have skill, we require a foreigner, and then you were allowed to bring him in. Come the expiry date, it's a new application, so you need to start by telling government that how far you've gone with your skills transfer. Those things need to come clear, because now this person's contract is coming to an end. There's no such a thing as permanent employment contract. So everything becomes a application for a new work visa. Now, you will approach the Department of Labor, but because we are dealing with employment agreements here, that application that you have submitted, probably, let's say it's a renewal, and you have not concluded. Home Affairs, we cannot reject that application on the basis that the Department of Labor is still busy. We will allow you to continue with that search, and then the expiry date. What is important is the expiry date of that visa. Now, I know that the challenge that you indicated in terms of the Department of Labor, in terms of the whole arrangements of getting recommendations from the Department of Labor. This is a national department, and I think they are working very hard to support these processes of renewals of work visas. And I'm not too sure in terms of their online applications if you have used it, but I believe that they can now do the application online. To some clients, I think it's becoming better. Probably somewhere in other provinces, they're still struggling to come to terms with the new changes. So it is quite key that we understand that in principle we do not have what we call permanent employment contract. come the end of the expiry date, it's a new application for a work visa, it needs to fulfill that. So in other words, you need to exhaust the search for labor in South Africa. Okay. Types of visas. Immigration Regulations 18.3, it talks about the contract of employment, how it needs to be structured. It must stipulate the conditions of employment, and it must be signed by both parties, that is an employer and the employee, in line with the labor standards for South Africa. Because we always, find very, very challenging areas, particularly when we are supposed to adjudicate on certain applications that some contracts are not signed by employers. That becomes a challenge, and it is not really like in the olden era when application for a general work visa was not in fulfillment of the requirements. We had that provision to go back to a client and ask certain documents to be fulfilled. So our system and online system applications, you need to adjudicate that application as it is, and that will warrant a rejection. General work visas, I think we all understand that this is a type of a visa that really talks to the position that you are saying that you are not able to fill in South Africa, and they don't fall under critical skills. Then they will fall under general work visas. That's why now the Department of Labor is very critical, because they have to pronounce on that general work visa. Subject to any prescribed requirements, a critical skills work visas may be issued by Director General to an individual in possession of such skills and qualifications determined by the critical skills for the Republic from time to time by Minister. This is about the critical skills, and I think I'm assuming that we all have the list of critical skills. But as you are aware, that list, in terms of the department, the Director General can change it from time to time. And up to so far, we haven't really done any amendments or changes to the critical skills. There's a reason why we have not attempted that process, because we are currently in the process of the white paper on international migration. So we cannot really move on the changes on the critical skills, because we are now, as I'm saying, the white paper is now at a very advanced stage. We are now to make it a bill before the end of this financial year, meaning by Friday. We need to have the submission ready for Minister to consider for the new immigration bill of under the white paper. These are the types of visas again. Intra-company transfer, I think it's in the main. Most of the multinational companies use this vehicle really to move their executive across to South Africa operations. We also have Section 22 of Asylum Seeker Permit. We have Section 27 of Refugee Permits. We have also the special dispensations, as I think for now we have done quite a few. It's Zimbabwe and Lesotho. Those people that are holding those visas are permitted by law to work, because these are dispensations that are made by Parliament. But however, I must emphasize that this dispensation comes at an engagement between in South African government. Cabinet will debate on it, and then they will engage the countries relevant, and they will come with this dispensation. Of course, there are a number of issues that arise before we can grant the dispensation. Now, the Section 22 asylum permits as well as the refugee, these cases falls under the Refugee Act. They are not in the Immigration Act. So this is what we always indicated in our approach, to say that for an asylum seeker to survive in South Africa don't have camps. We don't have camps where we keep and then we provide for asylum seekers. We allow them to migrate and integrate in the society. So how they must survive, it makes the provision for them to be able to work, to study and do business. That's why you find asylum seekers papers allowing them to do that, because as I'm saying, South Africa, we don't have camps, and it is not the intention of South Africa will have camps. We have signed into international conventions that we cannot. We will allow refugees and asylum seekers to integrate in our communities in the same way as refugee permits, and I think we're all clear on that. Visitors visa, I tend to agree and disagree with your presentation, Subuku, earlier on, to say that visitors visa is a work visa. It cannot be a work visa, and the intention is it will never be a work visa. So be careful when you use this vehicle, because we found in certain key industries and sectors people being mobilized on visitors visa with an endorsement to work. But when we get to these operations, we found people having employment contracts. So in other words, they are permanently employed in South Africa. And the purpose of this visitors visa is basically your pressing needs of your operations. For argument's sake, if you have bought this machine from Germany and you need technicians to come and fix something, you use those type of visas as a short interim to allow them to come in. So those people cannot seem to be working on that visa. Yes, they are found in your premises as an employer, but really they cannot be given a local contract. As I'm saying, we find in a number of operations, once information comes to our light, that some expatriates are on 11-2s and the employment contract is issued, and then it's a serious violation. Permanent residence, I think, is an obvious one, that when you are on a permanent residence, you are allowed to work. I think critical skills, we all understand it. How critical skills is arrived at. I was just briefing Suboko on the site to say the Department of Higher Education, they will either between the end of this financial year, 31st March and April, they will gazette what we call skills in high demand. That is the process of the Department of Higher Education. Then with that skills in high demand, critical skills is going to be derived out of that. So in other words, once the gazette is out from the Department of Higher Education, it will be passed to the relevant department, meaning the Department of Labor, Department of Home Affairs, and then the engagements start now on critical skills to say, these are the skills that are in high demand. What are those skills that are critical for the infrastructure? So in other words, what we say it's a critical skills is the skills that we say, if we are saying tomorrow we need to build a railway line between South Africa and Zambia, and we will need these types of skills, and it is very clear that this skill is not in South Africa. That's what we call critical skills. Anything else that may be deemed critical but not really critical in a sense, is a skill in high demand. So in other words, it is the skill that is there in South Africa, but situated somewhere else. Probably, let's say, we need a teacher who teaches Tsonga in Mafike. There's a school there that teaches Tsonga. Now, the teachers are there, but the teachers, where they are in Limpopo. So the employer will need to recruit from Limpopo. So that skill is not critical. But what we are saying, what is critical is when we wake up and we say, we need to drill oil in Mossel Bay, and there are no riggers who can do that. That becomes critical. So in other words, it's what drives the economy. That's the distinctions between the critical skills and the skills in high demand. Corporate general manager as a critical skills. I think this is what Subuku, you ask us to talk to it, because it is quite a thorny issue. You won't believe the types of applications that we receive across offshore and in South Africa of people claiming to be corporate managers. We receive very strange applications, and you know, in certain areas you'll find that you receive an application of a corporate manager, corporate general manager working at a driving school. These are the things that we receive. So in other words, people do everything and everything else just to get a visa. And we are saying to government, as government, when this category was arrived at, to say that this is a skill that is critical, we're talking of very highly skilled individual. We talk about a person. Even, I'll just make an example. The director, it's even much better. We just zoom to say that it is something that you can look at. But we're talking about people that see the organization as a whole. So in other words, they will stand here and then they'll be able to see this side of the organization and be able to see on all sides of organization. If you look at the Director General of Home Affairs, that is critical. He meets that requirements of corporate general manager. So in other words, he is responsible for the ultimate organization. But where is this organization? It can't be a driving school. It must be an entity, an organization that is recognized to be really a listed company in the stock exchange, things like that. So these are the challenges that we receive, and applications that we receive, and it's many of them. You can understand, they block an ordinary application of a genuine corporate general manager. Then that's when now adjudication becomes difficult. And then that's where now we go deeper and scrutinize and look at the risk engines and integrate this types of application to say, now, what is the professional body saying here? We even have to go as far as a professional body that is responsible for this to ascertain it. It is quite a key challenge. But really, to us, when this skill was identified as a critical skills, we're looking at executives, people that oversees the whole corporation or the organization. For example, as I'm saying, the Director General of the Department of Home Affairs can be the CEO of Citibank. Those are the people that we're looking at when we design this type of skills. Just a demonstration. We're just describing it in terms of really who can apply for those. Those are the chief financial officers, your chief operating officers. These are the key people that we consider it to be. Yeah. That is Home Affairs. We've got a lot to talk. That was just one part of Home Affairs. That is the immigration part and the compliance issues and the inspectorate functions, you name it. Then we have this area of repositioning. In other words, where we come from as the Department of Home Affairs and where we are today. I mean, colleagues, it's quite an obvious knowledge that we come a long way as the Department of Home Affairs. You will recall the Department of Interior. We used to fall under that category to be called the Department of Interior, and then we were managing a number of legislations over the years. This is just to give you in terms of the history where Home Affairs comes. In 1994, really, when the new administration came in, the Department of Home Affairs mandate needed to be crafted. Really, to say what is it that we are actually doing as the Department of Home Affairs, was really to build a single non-racial population register, and that was really the main. Then in 2006, 2009, then there were turnaround projects. Really, there were a number of projects by then. The NPR campaign, that is a National Population Register campaign. In other words, to ensure that you register the child within a particular date. We're encouraging people to do that. And then there was also, from the immigration side, the FIFA World Cup, which we've learned a lot. That was in really 2010, between 2010 and 2009. It was about service delivery and the crisis. Then in 2012 and 2016, then the modernization processes start to kick in. Then now, in other words, how we automate the systems and things like that. So there were a number of projects again in bringing automation into our system. So Buko, how long does it take now to get your ID card? 3 days? Yeah. That is an achievement. Looking at where we're coming from, when you apply for an ID, it will take you about 6 months to get an ID, or to a year to some people. So these were some of the advances that we got. Really, the repositioning business case for the department is really to look into as to how we professionalize the DHA really as a secure and fully digital Department of Home Affairs. Of course, that require investment into IT and related other skills. That's when now, as I said, there were a number of turnaround projects, and ultimately we're starting to see the results. And really, with regard to, let's say, the permitting environment, as I said to you in the beginning, to say that these things were dealt with in the region, and we had nightmares in really issuing visas. Then we brought on board the visa regime changes. We partnered with the VFS, and we started to see the results out of that. But as I said, really it is also contributing a lot in terms of minimizing fraud. We are able now to can detect fraudulent activities and other related challenges that the department has experienced over the years. I'm not too sure if ever you have managed to get a copy of our repositioning case. If maybe you can go to Home Affairs website, the document is there. You can read through it on how Home Affairs is approaching, is becoming has repositioned. Basically, what we all say in that the Department of Home Affairs we are now a security department. So in other words, we are in the security cluster. So we work with security departments like SAPS, other law enforcement agencies, NIA, and all those other departments. We are all part of one cluster because of the nature and sensitivity of our documents that we issue. As I'm saying, I think if you can get a copy of our repositioning paper, you'll really understand really where Home Affairs is going. 2018, this year, 2018, the white paper, we are supposed to present the bill to cabinet on international migration. In 2020, modernization of all our system into a common platform, that is what we call a basic national identity NIS system. So in other words, all the systems of Home Affairs will be on one platform. So in other words, when you enter at the port of entry, we will know who you are, biometrics and all that information. It get it registered on one central data point. If you apply for work visa, you apply for any other type of a visa, if you apply for water and license in the municipality, if you apply for any service of government, it will link you to that process of NIS. We call it what we commonly call it as a risk engine, that we need to check each and every person's identity. That probably will happen around 2020. Mandates of Home Affairs. I think I don't know whether and I think, let me just say I don't know. I think if you can just try and get a copy again of our annual performance plan and see the objectives of the Department of Home Affairs. What Home Affairs is all about in terms of citizenship, in terms of IDs, in terms of immigration, which is our area, what drives us in terms of our annual performance plan. There are key areas that we get measured on, which is on critical skills, business, visas, as well as general work visas and intra-company transfer. These are the key areas that are making contribution to the, and of course other areas that are making contribution to the National Development Plan. So as immigration services, we are measured under those performances. If you can get a copy of our annual performance plan, you'll see the targets that are there, and then you can be able to question the Department of Home Affairs whether are you reaching the targets on business visas, on critical skills visas. All targets are measured. I think that's basically the end of the presentation. Probably we can, I don't know, Chairperson, you'll guide me if there's any question to take. I'm more than willing, even if it's a Department of Labor or DTI, because we have regular interaction with the three departments. We sit on a forum to discuss projects of infrastructure. But I would please suggest that, I know that you said the thing, I won't be able to answer your question on how long my relative's visa was there. So those are technical things, and I don't think it's the purpose of this discussion. Thank you.
Good. Any questions?